started, I don't really carry one at a time unless I use them. So I just have to make a choice when I leave the house, which fingers are going to be. It seems like now I'm going to try to find. Okay, there's my mom.
Good morning. Welcome to another beautiful day in Chautauqua, at least for a while. My name is Bob Spiritus. I work on getting the speakers here. We welcome you. Same time, same station every week. We're always looking for speakers, so approach one of us and give us a name or, give us a holler somehow. Today we're very pleased to have Meghan Collins speak to us. We see a lot of environmental talks and other things that talk about global issues. She'll be talking about the local issues involving the climate in Chautauqua. So this should be a special treat for us. Her education is a Bachelor of Arts in Science from the McGill University in Montreal. She has a master's degree in Science and Environmental Studies from the let's see if I can get this right, Victoria University of Wellington, New Zealand. She has gobs of publications. I won't even go into that. She's a Chautauquan. So welcome her, please, and let's get on with the show. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you, everyone, for being here. I see a lot of familiar faces, and I see some new ones, so I'm really pleased to be here presenting on this very relevant and very local topic. In talking with Mark and Bob over the winter about potential themes for a talk, I have been wanting to look into what Chautauqua's future climate will look like and feel like for a while. So this was a nice opportunity for me to explore that, and I hope that I bring something insightful for you. Like Bob mentioned, we hear a lot about global climate futures, but it can be hard to know what that means for the places that we care about, and we all care about Chautauqua. So this talk will unpack what Chautauqua's future climate will look like and feel like in the not too distant future. And as an added dimension to this, bringing my kind of social science, facilitation, and science communication background together, we will also think about how to talk to your neighbors about this, even when that feels like it's across the fence, so across political divides. We will explore three aspects of Chautauqua's future climate: water and all things precipitation, so snow, intense rainfall, flooding. We'll talk about heat, and we will talk about wildfire smoke. Importantly, we will reflect on what this means for your perspective as neighbors and members of the Chautauqua community, and we'll also talk about how to build trust through dialogue, through some recognized techniques, and we'll actually practice that. So we'll take questions at the end, but as a facilitator, I love to weave kind of interactive elements into presentations, so you will have a chance to talk to each other, so the people around you. And these...
Can we just get closer to the mic for those of us?
Sure, thank you for saying so. Does that help? Project? Okay, great. Thank you for telling me.
Oh, thank
Thank
you.
you. I will speak into the mic. Great. Everything we're going to do today is shaped by both my education and my life experience, I grew up in Western New York, and I now live in a deep red region of the Western U.S., in that massive abyss somewhere between Salt Lake City, Utah, and Reno, Nevada, which often makes people's eyes cross this. They're like, where's that? I live in cowboy country. My husband's family is in ranching. They have been in ranching longer than Chautauqua has existed. And so at every family gathering and social event, we are rubbing elbows with people from across the kind of political thought spectrum. And so a lot of what I'm going to share today is based on my own experience talking about environment, climate, and natural resources in that kind of setting. So let's jump in. I'd like you to pause to introduce yourself to a neighbor around you. So kind of look around. We're going to come back to this idea of neighbor over and over again. So see if you can make eye contact, just say hello. I love seeing those smiles. And as we bring our attention back, reflect on a little warm-up question. So we won't share this one just yet, but I want you to reflect for yourself on what you love most about the Chautauqua setting. So we're here in this beautiful environment around the lake with lots of really old trees, parks. What do you love most about the Chautauqua setting? Just a warm-up question for you to reflect on. And now turning to the topic of climate again, I want to just lay the backdrop, kind of scene setting, where we are in this moment in climate response history. The global climate conversation has changed a great deal in the last 25 to 30 years, as you all know. It went from initiatives and hard work that were intended to promote global climate action through policy, through international coordination. And now we're in a moment where we find ourselves looking to place-based solutions because some of those global initiatives have not come through. 25 or 30 years ago, we also were seeking ways to mitigate or prevent some of the changes that were forecast. And we're now in a moment where conversations are focused more on adaptation. So rather than preventing emissions, we're more focused on how do we adapt to the changes that we're already seeing or that are predicted to be seen. And I think these are reflected in some of the headlines that I have. And this is happening against a political backdrop in how our nation considers trust in institutions, trust in communities, trust in science, trust in expertise. And as a result of all of these things, many people are turning to place-based solutions as forms of small doable steps that can be made. I believe that these local solutions rely on the fabric of our local communities and that we need to maintain that fabric as part of whatever action that we're taking. So I propose that in conversations about local climate and climate futures, we should do those hand in hand with activities that strengthen the social fabric of our communities. And that's why I've approached the talk in the way that I have. So weaving the science together with opportunities for dialogue and best practices. So on the topic of social fabric, the next question I'm going to ask you to reflect on is, what does being a good neighbor mean to you? And you each are going to have a unique answer to this. Before we share our responses, I want to consider the difference between two ways of listening. So we're going to share our responses in a moment with a neighbor concisely, but I want you to consider two ways of listening. Listening to reply and listening to understand. I'm sure we've all had experiences where we feel that someone's listening to us just to jump in and reply, and that doesn't always feel good. I'm sure we also have the experience of listening and being so excited to share. So I'm gonna ask you to try on this kind of green door, listening to understand, as we move through some of these conversations. So pick one neighbor around you, maybe make eye contact with them first, and then take turns listening. What does being a good neighbor mean to you? Maybe in 30 seconds each. Go ahead. If you haven't switched yet, now is a good time to do that. And we'll wrap up in about 10 seconds. So start making your offering your closing thoughts. Great. Thank you so much for sharing. I hope you came away with some insights or got to know the person next to you a little bit better. Before I jump into the topic of Chautauqua's future climate, I just want to provide a little bit of background on what exactly we mean, or how we forecast future climate predictions. So, a climate model, as I'm sure you're familiar, is a computer representation of the climate system. So it takes into account atmosphere, ocean, land, biotic interactions, and scientists can change the inputs, so the level of greenhouse gases, for example, and yield a different output. We have relied on global climate models with kind of large-scale resolution, so 50 to 100 kilometer square gridded cells. And in recent years, many scientists have been developing regional climate models, which are much higher resolution, so you can pinpoint something at the county or municipal level and understand aspects of your local climate. These there are issues, kind of challenges of uncertainty, so no model is perfect, but they are really helpful tools for thought experiments like we're going to do today. So I've listed here a number of the interactive climate models that are available publicly through internet browser interfaces. I did not develop any of these, so we are benefiting today from the hard work of many, many minds from all over the country. And what we're going to do is weave together several aspects of climate relevant to Chautauqua here. So jumping in, beginning with all things water, snow, related runoff, and intense rainfall. The top line summary for all things precipitation is that winters in Western New York are likely to look and feel different. We're likely to see a greater proportion of precipitation falling as rain versus snow, and rainstorms are predicted to become more intense. Both of these things increase flood risk, and this is one of the biggest areas of concern for Chautauqua County. I'm going to walk through a series of maps looking at different aspects of snowfall and rainfall next. So what you're looking at here is a map of the eastern Great Lakes. Instead of political boundaries, what you see are watershed boundaries on the map. And it's not very high contrast, but the watershed in which the Chautauqua Lake is situated is outlined in blue. This map is depicting projected change in winter snowfall between 2025 and 2049. So what you see is that from this kind of multiple model output, less snowfall is predicted for the region. Does that mean the region is going to be drier? No. Actually, there's forecasting more winter precipitation, but that precip is falling instead as rain. So here you can see the same geographic area with the multi-model mean, kind of a high emission scenario between 2025 and 2049, forecasting more precip falling as rain in the winter. What happens to all that water after it melts or hits the ground? Well, that's why we look at this factor called runoff. So runoff is a proportion of precipitation that is not absorbed by the soil or lost to evapotranspiration in the atmosphere. Runoff is predicted to increase. This can have a couple of implications, there are a couple drivers of increased runoff for an area like Western New York. I mentioned one of them before, more precipitation falling as rain, so it doesn't stay on the ground kind of in the snowpack reservoir. Instead, it runs right down through our surface waters. Earlier snowmelt can increase the timing of that runoff, so we'll see more winter runoff because it's running off in January, February, and March, rather than those spring months when we might normally see it run off. And finally, we may see more rain on snow events. These are terms that this is a term that you might be familiar with if you follow the news of the western US, where a lot of snowpack falls in the mountains and is stored as snowpack for many months. If a warm, wet storm like an atmospheric river comes through, it can melt a lot of snowpack very quickly. Yellowstone flooding, if you remember 2022, there were big floods in Yellowstone in 2022, and likewise in Seattle in 2025. Those were both caused by rain on snow events. More rain on snow events are forecasted for our area. That means areas in floodplains like the shores of Chautauqua Lake or around some of our bigger creeks are susceptible to floods in the future. So this change in runoff is something that has kind of many dimensions that are worth unpacking. Can any of you think of a intense rainfall event that happened recently? yeah. So yesterday, I wasn't at the AMP, but I heard it was pretty livening. Rainstorms are already becoming more intense, so yesterday was an illustration of that. I'm not in the business of climate attribution, which is saying this particular event on this particular day is or is not driven by climate change, but yesterday I think is an illustration of the kind of intense rainfall that we are likely to see more and more of in the future. So what you're seeing now is a map of all of New York State of 100-year rainfall events, which is the kind of probability of the 1% probability of an intense rainfall event. I know that the lettering is quite small, but this is basically what we're already seeing, a 5 to 10% increase of intense rainfall events for the current period of time. And after 2040, we're likely to see 15 to 20% more intense rainfall in some parts of the state. So this has implications for our sewer systems and other infrastructure that kind of deals with or copes with those large runoff events or those peak discharge events. So my question for you to consider is, have you seen any intense rainfall or even flooding in our area? And what happened? So we'll take a moment to share, see if you can make eye contact with a different neighbor. So somebody you haven't already spoken with. I know you're kind of stuck in your seats, but see if you can turn or even shift and just share briefly, 30 seconds each. Have you seen any intense rainfall and what happened? If you haven't switched yet, now is a good time to swap. And start to wrap up in the next 10 seconds or so. By show of hands, just hands up or hands down, I'm curious if in the course of this conversation, if you learned anything new or surprising By show of hands, did you learn anything new or surprising in the course of that short conversation? Some of you. Okay, cool. Thank you. We're now going to turn to extreme heat, which sounds extreme, but it's a way of referencing heat days that are hotter than what we're used to in our area. So the top line summary is that Chautauqua will feel hotter in the future. High heat days are predicted to become more frequent, and we will need more energy to stay cool. So this has implications for both public health and our infrastructure and the energy required to cope with heat. This is a National Weather Service graphic from July 1st, 2026. Many of you may have been in Chautauqua during the heat wave. Many of you may have been at home, but the heat index was very high, and there were areas of the region that were above 100 degrees, and cooling centers were opened across Buffalo and other areas of Western New York to help people without AC cope with that heat. So in a minute, I'm going to start this graphic, but before 1990, only 7 of 10 years saw a day where the temperatures rose above 90 degrees Fahrenheit. So just to give you the historical baseline, in only 7 of 10 years did we see a day where where temperatures went over 90 degrees. So this is a graphic or a visualization of the change. I know it's very hard to see. So what this is saying is that by 2040, in a high emission scenario, we are predicted to see on average 14 days above 90 degrees Fahrenheit in Chautauqua County. So that's a big change from the baseline that we're used to. And by 2060, that is again forecast to double. So 28 days a year. So that's a month of 90-degree days. So that's a lot. And when you consider humidity and heat index, that can be, that can feel very hot. That can be quite difficult to cope with. I'm going to share one more graphic related to temperature. So far, what we've been looking at are predictions by a certain year if we continue on the same trajectory of emissions. Another way to consider climate futures is, what will the temperature look like if or when we reach a certain level of global climate warming? So a way of measuring that is if the global temperature rises by an average of 4 degrees Celsius, what will that mean for our local climate here? So if the global climate warms by an average of 4 degrees Celsius, our average high temperatures in Chautauqua County will increase by 8.8 degrees Fahrenheit. So I know that when we hear, an increase in 2 degrees or 3 degrees Celsius, it sounds kind of minor, but that doesn't necessarily have a linear translation to where we live. So that will feel a lot. We will experience that as a lot hotter. I want to touch now on the energy required to cope with that heat. Many people turn up the AC when it gets hot. Cooling degree days is a way of measuring how much energy is needed to keep indoor temperatures cooler. And this is a time series graph forecasting the energy requirement or energy demand of those forecast increased temperatures. So in gray, you see the historical baseline, and in red, you see the kind of high emission scenario if we can continue on the same trajectory. So the number of cooling degree days is forecast to go up, so there will be increased demand for energy. As you can imagine, there are equity concerns with this. As energy bills increase, not everyone has the funds to shoulder the increased electrical cost. Likewise, hot days have public health impacts. This is a map not of projections, but of mortality on high heat days. So high heat does have an impact in terms of public health, so on a large scale, on our youngest and our elders in the population. This is a county-by-county map of mortality by children less than 5 years old, a running 20-year average. So what's the percent increase in mortality on those days higher than 95 degrees? I know this is a heavy topic. Consider this question now. how did the heat wave this summer affect you and your family? Did it affect your health? Did it affect your daily routines? How you went about doing life, staying cool? What did you have to change? So consider that for a second, and then share with a neighbor. And we'll wrap up in about 10 seconds. By show of hands, did you hear anything new, surprising, or helpful in that dialogue? New, surprising, or useful? Okay, thank you. The third dimension of climate futures that I'm going to share is wildfire smoke. And this is not a topic that's included in a lot of regional climate models because it's very complex. Forests burning, conditions leading to wildfire, atmospheric transport. So what I'm going to share are just a couple of insights, but I do want to have it on our radar, in particular because we had such an intense smoke event earlier this summer. Chautauqua County is likely to see and smell more wildfire smoke in the future, and it has implications for public health, particularly for vulnerable populations, and it can these implications can strain our health infrastructure. The most locally specific data that I found on the connection between wildfire smoke and public health is this graph of 2023 emergency department admissions during a smoke event that year. And what you see is in the blue, the line shows the concentration of particulate matter 2.5, so that's particulate matter in the air that's 2.5 microns or smaller. And that is the size in which those particles they become embedded in your lungs and they actually enter the bloodstream. So they can cause inflammation. I'm not a public health expert, but they can cause inflammation of more than just your respiratory system. So the bars are emergency department visits. So you can see a correlation between PM 2.5 concentration in the atmosphere and emergency department visits for different parts of New York State. I mentioned that regional climate models have not incorporated wildfire smoke concentrations in their modeling yet. I did find a paper in Nature that is forecasting excess mortality as a result of wildfire smoke. And so they modeled this. This is a paper that came out in 2025, led by some folks at Stanford. So projections specific to PM 2.5 show an increase in deaths as increase in PM 2.5 goes up. You can see on a county level, more countywide deaths are forecast for smoke event days. And the same paper is modeling that exposure to wildfire smoke and particularly PM 2.5 currently contributes to 40,000 excess deaths annually, so that's currently. So when there's a wildfire smoke event, how many more people pass away as a result? And by 2050, that number will increase to 70,000. So we're currently at 40,000, that's forecast to increase to 70,000. So complications due to respiratory and other events causes that mortality. When there was a lot of smoke in the air here, was there anyone that you worried about? And how did you manage? Did you wear an N95 mask? Did you manage your indoor air quality? Did you reduce the time outdoors, reduce your activity? How did you manage? And how did you help other people in your life manage? Curious for you to share. Go ahead, yeah.
Have masks. I mean, we just kind of, I stayed inside. I had a mask, but it felt so complicated to try to find one. So I just made a note that next year we should sponsor masks and put them around like little boxes right here. Yes. So that's
Wrap up in about 10 seconds. So finish what you're saying. I know that mortality from extreme heat and mortality from wildfire smoke are quite heavy topics. So I'm going to ask a different question now. Did listening to one another and relating to one another help cope with these heavy facts? A little bit? Doesn't take away the heaviness, though. So I've covered 3 aspects of future climate. Knowing that we are in this, time of particularly exacerbated political divisions in our country, where climate change is essentially a culture war issue, I wanted to come back to the question of what approaches to dialogue can help build trust. So I'm going to share a couple of recognized evidence-based approaches to that now, and then I'm going to distill what I was intending to do by embedding opportunities for you to talk to one another throughout the talk. So approaches to dialogue that can help build trust include face-to-face interaction. And this is a sociological, like in the field of sociology, this is a hypothesized approach to reducing division and building trust. Taking conversations out of maybe anonymous spaces or spaces like, internet spaces where we're too far removed from what it would mean to say something, to say X, Y, and Z in front of somebody we're going to run into later. Recognizing shared identities, interests, or values. Listening, so approaching with curiosity and with the intent of the other feeling heard, and then taking a local focus because that is an aspect of a shared identity. So I mentioned, earlier in the talk that this moment in local climate response, I believe, depends on maintaining the fabric or the strength of the fabric in local communities, and I hope that these are useful. As we moved through that series of open-ended questions, I was intending to model some approaches that I use with my neighbors in Elko County, Nevada, in cattle and mining country. I distilled these into a kind of easy format, stating an objective observation. I noticed X. I noticed we had a lot less snow this winter. Inquiring how it connects to something they care about. And then asking for their ideas on how they managed or how they make it better. And I use this all the time. This enables me to talk to people and listen without ever mentioning the word climate. It keeps the conversation focused on things that, one, we may have both experienced or are experiencing, and there's a sort of immediate relevancy, a local relevancy to approaching the conversation like this. I do science communication trainings with my researcher colleagues, and I say this lovingly, but I work with a lot of professors who love to profess, and so one of the things that I love to share is everything you learned about science communication, you already learned in kindergarten. 2 ears, 1 mouth. So do more listening than you do talking when trying to relate. Why the approach that I just shared? So note something observable, ask how it impacted or connects to something they care about, and ask how they're managing. Well, it avoids the power struggle that comes with evangelizing on climate topics, like trying to change someone's mind. You might find some common ground and you might learn something. And like I just mentioned, it focuses on something that you can both directly experience and both immediately relates to where you are. So that's why I have, it sort of is an approach that you know, I've learned over time and then distilled in this format. I'm gonna close this talk with this quote from beautiful Maya Angelou. When it comes to speaking across the fence with our neighbors, this might be one of the most important things. It's not about the facts or information that we provide, but it's how we connect and how we feel through that conversation. So even as a country and even as our neighbors, you know, when we don't agree on all things, I hope that your takeaway from this talk is that one small and doable thing that we can do to maintain the fabric of our communities is help our neighbors feel heard. So thank you very much.
By this time in the season, you should know the drill. Please come up to the microphone and please, please ask a question.
Early on in the talk, you listed a number of organizations, mostly look like federally based, that you could consult for maps and things like that. Since we can't get any truth out of the White House or the administration currently, can you still trust those organizations? I'm a physician, and I'm very worried about what the CDC puts out. I don't know whether they're going to tell the truth, and the same thing may pertain here.
I trust USGS, I trust NOAA, I trust the regional climate centers that have put these climate models together. Some of those pages, at least one of those pages had a disclaimer that the information hadn't been updated since 2025, but I do trust the information that is still on there and the good work that our civil servants continue to do. I don't trust Truth Social, but I trust the hard work of our civil servants.
Let me just add to that. I'm an epidemiologist, and I trust Caitlin Janelina. She has a website called Your Local Epidemiologist, and it's really good. It comes out every week. She charges $50 a year or something. So it's Your Local Epidemiologist. I think that's the words, but Caitlin Janelina.
Yeah, I don't have I can't recall where, but I know NOAA scientists that were let go or afraid of being let go set up their own private sites so their data wouldn't get lost, but I can't say more than that. Do those models speak about high wind events? We had trees fall on houses here, limbs bigger around than you or I are, came down in the early season.
Yes, I didn't show it, but storm intensity, including high winds, are part of hazard forecasts. So that is kind of part and parcel to intense storm events. What should we expect here? Off the top of my head, I don't remember. But I think so we talked about 100-year storms, intense rainfall. Yesterday's thunderstorm might be an illustration of the kinds of things we're expected to see either more frequently or the intensity of those increase by a small percent. So, yeah, good question.
Hi, Megan. Thank you so much. I just want to introduce myself. My name is Sam Butler. Maybe you've seen me around a little bit. I just wanted to say, when it comes to these big problems, a lot of people end up asking, what can we do? And for a lot of people, $45,000 for rooftop solar panels and a heat pump that doesn't necessarily make you more resilient because you lose the power when the grid goes out anyway is not really an answer. So I just wanted to say that I'm actually a journalist and I work on sort of taking lower cost solutions, making them more accessible to folks. And I just wanted to say hello when it comes to lower power, more resilient cooling for the summer heat waves, similar things in the winter time. Just wanted to say that, and I would love to talk with you after, because I think what you said about what we can do locally is obviously what we need to do. Cities are taking years to build multi-million-dollar resilience hubs that's not, fast enough for what we need right now, especially with El Nino coming. So that's it. I would love to talk with you more later, but just wanted to say that, there's so much we can do locally that's really cost-effective and pays for itself also.
Thank you. Commenting on that, I know that infrastructure and policy solutions can be slow, and in my, again, personal and professional reflections, the small and doable things that we could do every day is maintaining that community fabric, so when there's an opportunity to act, we can, and hearing ideas on very small scale, micro scale innovation. For me, that's why it kind of comes back to that at this moment in time. But I hope that would blossom into other things. So thank you. Yes.
This isn't necessarily a Chautauqua-specific question, but I'm suspicious that there's something similar going on in Chautauqua. Where I live, which is in the Delaware Valley region, we used to have, before cost-cutting measures from Washington destroyed it, a really wonderful government flood prediction map. And if there was heavy rains, I could check, was there a likelihood of flooding in my area or wasn't there? Mm-hmm. That's gone. Who might we contact to try to rebuild some do we go to a university and try and get somebody involved? Any thoughts? I suspect something similar has happened in Chautauqua.
Yeah, so universities are doing, I think I'm going to make a generalization. Universities are doing what they can. Chautauqua County does have a hazard mitigation plan that was published in 2024 that accounts for climate change. It uses the term climate change. I don't know about interactive tools in real time. National Weather Service offices are still very committed to protecting life and property, so if there were flood warnings, they issue a lot of their forecasts not only through weather.gov but through their Facebook pages. So I don't know about real-time, real-time tools like that, but I think National Weather Service would be my first go-to.
It's still the first go-to.
Yeah. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you.
Hi. Hi, I'm from Virginia, and I think you hit the nail on the head on one of your earlier slides delineating the watershed around the lake and so forth. We've got a lot of citizen science and watershed organizations in Commonwealth of Virginia, and the trick is to getting to know these data and to be able to interpret them and bring them to the County Board of Supervisors. And everybody, kids, teachers, whatever, to get the word out as to the ups and downs of the watershed. So if you start local and talk local, to me, that's one of the best ways to approach a really big problem.
You're speaking to my citizen science heart here. So thank you for bringing that up in terms of another opportunity for involvement.
Hi, thanks so much. I live in New York City and just wanted to comment on a couple of things that other folks have said. One is for the person in the Delaware Water Gap. I don't know the political persuasion of your representatives, but even if they tend to vote against climate solutions, I think it's still worth calling their office. I know it's worth calling because they count the number of calls that come in. And if you can say something really specific and local about how, you know, we used to have this wonderful tool that I personally relied on and now it's not there, can you please work to fix it? I think that's really meaningful. The other thing is that my husband and I got solar panels in March, and when you had your question about how the heat wave affected us, it was actually much easier than previous summer heat waves because our electric bill right now is zero. Except for a little connection charge, and we have been able to use the air conditioner without worrying about it. And we got a loan from NYSERDA, the New York State Energy and Research Authority or something like that. And the payment on that loan is $167 a month, and our electric bill in previous summers was, $200 or $300 a month. So I'm sure there'll be less of a difference than the winter, but it is, if you can make the down payment, it is a really wonderful solution.
Thank you.
Hi, I was born in Argentina, in the area where you get your Malbec from. There is a dust storm in there called the Zonda. It's the same as a simoon in North Africa. We learned to live with it, and we probably, at some time, somebody may ask me, what do you do when this Zonda comes?
Yeah, we are learning to live with many things, and dust is something we're seeing across areas of the Midwest, also the West. Hopefully we'll learn from each other. We won't have to reinvent the wheel. Bob.
There are two trends here maybe that perhaps we can use. It looks like there are some more families with children, and the club is doing well. Are there ways where we can inspire the kids to do things, not preach to them about the climate, but have them do things in your sort of citizen science to help? Also, this summer, there's been a big increase in improvisation and studying improvisation. Maybe we can encourage those people to make climate one of the things they improvise about.
I like both of those suggestions. I'm a mom, and the way that I hope that I'm empowering my son, he's 3, is to, when he's curious about something, that he can see the effect of what he's doing, for both positive and negative. So he is an agent of change, and teaching them, and hopefully instilling in him that can carry throughout his life, and he can make choices in that direction. So for youth, that's, if I were to personally think about a program for Chautauqua youth, I would probably approach it with that mindset.
If only somebody would study these issues and we could find out what's causing it. Gosh. I don't understand.
What the heck?
Protect Our Winters was here a few years ago. I think they said 6 million people who enjoy the outdoors don't vote. Is that right? Was that the right number, Mark? Anyway, there's elections, and that's the best thing I can think of is vote to help solve some of these things.
Yeah. We don't have a lot of climate-specific policy up for a vote right now, but natural hazards certainly, wildfire, drought, flooding, intense heat, and those are things that you can, I'm not saying this affiliated with DRI, I'm saying this as a resident, those are the kind of things that you can press your officials to vote on, even if it's not climate specific. Any other questions? Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Don't leave yet, unless you're going to put that $100 bill in our basket back there. Next week, we're having he was here last year, George Carlo, who is a professional sports, that's a great sound, sports scientist. And he's going to talk this year about what he's learned from working with major league teams that can actually help the health of people like us. So it's not going to be how does a pitcher recover from Tommy John surgery, but how do we walk safely on the streets with things that he's learned from working with professional athletes. And he may have a couple of anecdotes about those athletes also. So I think you'll enjoy it and you'll learn something. And the new president of Chautauqua was roaming the grounds. When you meet him, you might say how important you find science and dealing with the lake and dealing with climate. And we live in a world of where it used to be called squeaky wheels, getting the grease, but it's how priorities are set. And if your issue's not a priority, it's not going to be fixed. So make sure people know that we care about this and that science is important. And science is not religion, it's not God. Science is a process. And we need science to work